Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Copy Corner podcast, sponsored by copyforeverybody.com and draftedcontent.io. This show is where we have this little corner of the internet where we like to talk about copywriting tips to help you write and sell smarter. And the voice you hear right now is one of your hosts, Terry Schilling, and with me, as always,
Dan Marzullo.
Dan Marzullo, the creator of draftedcontent.io. And Dan, of course, we always have good episodes here on the Copy Corner, but today's topic, we want to get into a big part of the writing process for any freelance writers, copywriters who have a side hustle, really any type of freelancers too. If you come across the Copy Corner to help write, messages that helps you sell whatever it is you're selling online and working towards. We want to talk about how to set up a successful client meeting. So we're going to go over 4 tips, when you're talking to a prospect to really help show your value, prove that you are this seasoned professional and that you can genuinely help them achieve their goals. Because Dan, I'm sure when we first started and we hear from other freelancers, we get nervous on these prospect calls. Is my budget going to be too much? How do I bring this up effectively? How do I show my value on the call? What type of questions should I ask? What should I prepare for? It's an interesting process, but it's a big process of landing clients. So we want to go through some things that we've learned and that what we use, that work a lot as well, when we have a prospect, client interview meeting. So I'll pause there, Dan, and go ahead and share your first tip.
Yeah. So my first tip here is, ask a bunch of discovery questions, right? You don't want to just get on a call and let them just, ask you a couple of questions and be like, all right, here's the cost. Like, okay, thanks. Bye. Like you're not, you're not understanding their problem. You're not building any rapport. You're really not going to have a very highly chance of success on that call. So ask some questions up front, be the first one to really get to know their business and what they're trying to accomplish, because that's kind of step one, figure out what they're trying to do first so you can even see if you can help them. It's kind of like, just classic sales principles, right? You're the doctor and you're prescribing a solution based on their needs. So you have to know their needs first. You can't a doctor doesn't go in and be like, oh, you're sick. Okay, here, just take some ibuprofen. They're going to ask you like, well, what's wrong? What are you feeling? And based on what you tell them, they're going to say, okay, you need this to get better, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with sales and copywriting and these client sales calls. It's like, start off asking some questions, figure out what they need, really understand that well, before you then jump into your pitch on, well, here's what I do and how I can help you and this and that. That's my number one tip there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let them start talking about what they need. And I love your analogy. It's like the doctor's like, let me look in your eyes. Okay, you have this. So here's a prescription for $200. Go ahead and get that. Yeah. No, but it is such important to kind of take the lead in the conversation, right? But also let them do a lot of the talking of how you can help them. And I love that in the discovery question side of things. And also too, like it's important if someone reaches out to you from your website or sees something you posted on social media, maybe to have some of those questions up front to ensure that it's a good fit that you get on this call. But of course, if you're a beginner and someone finds you and there's not a lot of information, you're excited to get on this call, great. Take the call. You learn with experience. There is no right or wrong in the beginning. Get comfortable with what you feel is best. But it kind of leads into my second tip, for this episode, is to actively listen. So when you ask these questions, it could be like, what are your goals for the project? Or what sparked you to look for a copywriter or content writer at this time for your business? And with those questions, they may come back to you as like, well, I noticed my bounce rate on my homepage is really low. I have this discovery call that I really want people to reach out to me so I could start selling my services. But people aren't really staying on the homepage and clicking that button. So I feel like my message is off, right? So if I'm listening to that, and I come back, it's like, okay, so a big focus, we want to get that homepage message more cleared up. So what I would do is have these exercises to learn more about your personality and what your tone of voice is. And of course, what is this offer? What benefit do they get? How do they improve their lives if they reach out to you and start taking these next steps? So we'll go through that homepage and come up with a good call to action, a good headline that grabs their attention, and then I'll keep going from there. But you see how I'm repeating back what they're looking for because I was actively listening, right? And then I could start going into some solutions and more into my process instead of just going into, it's like, okay, I hear what you want. You need a homepage, you need this. Here's what I typically charge, right? You're being
Right.
more conversational with them. And this could also just spark some more questions, and maybe they'll start talking about what else they may need. They may find that they really like this, and you're just building that trust and rapport. So I think that actively listening element too, when you're on a freelance client meeting, is essential too. Just repeat back to them. It's really like a sales call. Like, you're starting to build rapport. Like, hey, look, if they're repeating back to me, we're just naturally feeling this connection, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the simplest ways to build rapport that people don't do is just show them, oh wow,
Hmm.
like okay, Terry understands exactly what I need. He's conveying that message back to me. Like I'm hooked. He
Yeah.
knows what we need. He's the expert, so let's hire him, right? That's kind of how you
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we got Brittany Crossan popping in on
Nice.
LinkedIn. Look at that. She's
Hey, Brittany.
awesome. She's a good friend. Hey, Brittany, how's it going? Yeah, we got, and for people listening to the show, we do like to do these live. If you're listening for one of the first few times, we go live on these all the time on YouTube and occasionally on LinkedIn, which we're on LinkedIn today. So thanks for listening. And if you have any questions watching along, please feel free to comment and we'll get to them at the end. It'll be good for all our listeners. But Dan, what's your third tip to a successful freelance client meeting interview?
So my third one is to present your rates on the call, right? So
Mm,
don't wait and like send them rates after you get off the phone or before the call, because then that's really when you get the chance to kind of dive into that and sell those services. So one thing, the way that we structure that is we just have a simple standard rate sheet for all of our services for every client, and then we just present that on the call. So it's usually like you have your conversation, you do all your discovery. You've told them about how you're going to help with X, Y, and Z. And at the end, they're
mhm,
typically like, okay, cool. How the rates work? What do you charge for this project? Whatever. So then you can just super simple say, oh, sure. Let me share my screen with you real quick and I'll walk you through our packages, right? It can be a super smooth transition like that. Pop up your
mm.
sheet, walk them through how it works, and then just wait, like be silent, let them respond, ask questions or whatever, and go from there. But present those fees on the call so you can understand any objections up front, walk through those and get from A to B. I think that's a really smooth way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And people will like wonder, how do I bring up budget? Should I bring up? The answer that we both recommend is yes. And I think this is just a great way to me feel more comfortable in that situation, is to have some type of rate sheet and show this to the client. That way, then they can ask questions and see it a little bit more. And then you guys have a firm way of saying, look, this is the typically what I charge for XYZ based on what we're talking about. And what I love to do is ask the question, what is the budget you have for the project? And then be silent. Because the more you start talking after that, like, so what is the budget that you have for the project? Because, if you're looking for this, maybe we can be flexible depending on this. Sometimes you just start backpedaling in your mind because you don't want to lose this contract, because it's like, oh, I just charged 4,000. This would be awesome if they said yes. Right. But it's like, well, maybe that's too much. So maybe like I can offer a discount if you do this. Just be quiet and say, what is the budget that you have for the project? Or what is the budget? And then see what they say and then start the conversation. Right. And then if you showed them that rate sheet, they can get an idea and being like, well, this does fit, because you're kind of putting them on the spot a little bit. And then if it's really out of their budget, then then you can talk about lowering the scope. But then you start realizing, like, look, this call was still effective, it was a learning experience for me, but this just isn't the right fit for me. You don't want to waste your time on a project there.
Right.
It's my,
I like how you said right there, Terry, if they try to negotiate you, you can then talk about lowering the scope, right? That's key. It's like if they come back and say, well, can you do it for this, or any discounts available, or whatever they say, instead of just going, oh yeah, sure, we can do it for this much, say, no, but we can do less, right? We can do X amount for that budget versus maybe they originally wanted 4 articles a month or something, but their budget was less than what you charge for that. Say, well, we could do two, for within your budget or whatever. I like how you say, lessen the deliverables. Don't cut yourself short on pricing for that there.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh, Dan made a note. Sorry, we're going live and it's like 4 tips.
Yeah, Tim.
Sorry, I have 4 tips to a successful freelance client meeting. I'll hide that right now.
was like,
If you
all the
watch live,
writers are going to catch
if you
that and
watch,
give us
if you watch,
grief.
look at this, look how professional writers we are. But Dan, that's such a good point here too. We did get another question from someone watching, from Marcus Lorang. Do you guys find more success closing the deal with set pricing or revenue share percentages? Good question, Dan. What would you say?
Yeah, I wouldn't ever personally do a revenue share. I think,
Hmm.
because, and, I actually saw a big debate on this topic the other day. It's like, regardless of their success, you have your fixed costs, right? You have your team and
Mm.
people that are delivering the work. And if you're only getting paid off of the success of that, you're kind of cutting yourself short. So it's, take care of your costs up front with set pricing. That's always my advice for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And a client may come to you and ask if they guarantee, can you guarantee anything, or what type of results are typical from your perspective? And it's hard to it puts you in an awkward spot, but you can confidently start saying of like, I can't guarantee specific results. What I can promise you is just this experience and my process that helps find a new messaging that I find effective. And then we'll work on this. And of course, we can always test certain things based on the beginning to see what type of results we get. And I can help you edit from there, as well. Um,
Yeah,
because a
right.
lot of the effort's going to be on their end too, of course, when it comes to getting those results. Like, I can deliver this for you, but then they got to implement it, of course. So it's difficult, but I agree with you. Revenue share percentages, that's just a way for them to lower the cost. It just try to entice it because they're just trying to feel confident. And I just don't think that's effective from a freelancer side of things.
Yeah, there was a conversation on this in terms of SEO the other day in this group I'm a part of, and the client had said, "Hey, how about you do all the SEO work for us, and then when we start seeing revenue, we'll split that." And so essentially, what that was going to
Hmm.
require was that guy's team doing work for at least 6 months to get their site into a
Mm,
position to generate that traffic. So he would have had to eat costs for 6 months before they could even see those profits. So you're asking the agency or the contractor to take on all the risk up front, which I just don't think is fair, right? Show them those
right.
case studies of, hey, here's how we've done it for past clients, and then let them make that decision from there.
Yeah. Excellent question, though, Marcus. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
for sure.
Uh, Last tip number 4 that we've talked about. So we've gone through it. We've talked about having discovery questions, taking lead for that conversation for the interview meeting. Then we talked about as well of actively listening, and then bringing up budget and using and presenting a rate sheet, like Dan said, on the screen. I think that's a great tip, as well. But the last one I want to just bring up is talk about timing for the project. Don't forget to ask about what is the timing that we have? What is an ideal timeline that they'd like to get? One thing that I always recommend is don't always expect that you could start right away. Because I think a lot of clients expect when they get on the call, it's like, oh, let's start in a few days. Well, you have, of course, timing issues. If you have that flexibility, great. You can start sooner than later. But what I typically do is about 1 to 2 weeks, depending on really my availability. If I'm booked out, I let them know even before we get on a call that, I can take on projects, starting in June, or like 2, 3 months from now, if that's the case. But typically, there's a little bit of an onboarding process for me to start writing, which begins in like 1 to 2 weeks. And so I want to just let them know that and set those expectations. And then if they come to me, it's like, well, we really want to start here, let's say in 3 days. Well, then I would propose even a little bit of a rush fee to get started, to really adjust my schedule. Because just be respectful of your time, because you get on a project, you're feeling good about yourself. You may have other projects on your schedule right now that you're working on, and then you get overwhelmed because you need to start writing this one. Give yourself some flexibility there as a freelancer. And trust me, you'll feel better about yourself. I promise you that.
Yeah, don't put that extra stress on you, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's just another tip that I always like to bring up, is talk about that timeline, going forward as well, and just get those expectations right away. Because I think those first three are really good of setting yourself up for success, of having, of getting that contract, really putting yourself in a good position. And then the next one is this tip about finding the timeline, is really just a little bit of like an admin side of things. It's just something not to forget. So you feel like, oh, I have to get started right away.
Right. And setting those expectations up front for how that onboarding process works is helpful for
Hmm.
that client to understand how that flow is going to be and not leaving them in the dark there.
Yeah, absolutely. Another quick bonus question, Dan. Would you always recommend? We talked about sharing a rate sheet, but would you always recommend trying to get on a video call or audio call with the client,
I always do
especially this time?
Zoom video. Yeah, I
Yeah,
always just do that, right? And then if they don't turn their screen on, I'll flip mine off. But
yeah.
regardless of whether it's audio or video through Zoom or Google Meet or whatever you use, you can still share the screen, right? Even if you're not face
Hmm.
to face at the end, I still do the same thing. You can just flip your screen on, present that. I don't do any phone calls anymore just because I don't
It's
know.
weird. It's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
it's it's just less
we,
common, and a lot of the times too, I think a lot of people is, we're kind of global now, right? Everybody's working all over.
hmm
So if you're talking to people outside of your country, you can't use your phone. You got to go Zoom anyway. And I think people just expect to see a Zoom link in a meeting invite now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can always just set the expectation again of like, hey, do you want to make this just an audio only or with video as well? That way those expectations again are set. Where like, look, I don't have to get super ready to like look presentable. Like we can just get on a Zoom or Google Meet with just audio, which is
Right.
still just like the same as well.
Yeah, and I like too. I think when you add that video component, if they're open to it, you can build rapport better because you can see them,
Yeah.
you can see them
Yeah.
smiling or, you
Look what
know.
Jacqueline, she just commented. We have a comment here on LinkedIn of
Yeah,
just video is
exactly.
usually a good
Right.
idea. Facial expressions are important. And I agree. It's nice to have that human kind of interaction of like, see, look, this is who I say I am as well, type of
Right. I
thing.
think, yeah, in a sales call, right? One of your goals is just to connect with that person as much as possible. So, any little things that you can do to add to make that easier, like adding video,
Hmm.
repeating back, active listening, like Terry said, all those are going to really help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. Great episode today. Thank you, everyone, for your questions there on LinkedIn. But again, 4 tips to a successful client meeting interview. We appreciate the questions. Dan, anything else before we go?
That's it for me, Terry.
Yeah, that's it for me. Again, everybody who's listening, check out copyforeverybody.com and craftedcontent.io. Both have resources to help you out, and you can also reach out to Dan and see what him and his team up to. If your business needs some help with content, getting on podcast interviews and helping grow your business. Some great resources and insight there. As always, look up the Copy Quarter and rate and review where you can. Follow Dan and I on social media. You can search our names and you'll find us there and interact. But we put out these podcasts every 2 weeks live on YouTube. So follow the Terry Schilling Creative YouTube channel to come and tune in there. But thanks again for your time. We'll catch you on the next episode.